Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee workshop. Now it's from antique chestnut beams like these that I can harvest enough material to build a writing desk like this. Now we got inspiration from an antique original that we found in the Napa Valley of California. I'll show you that next, right here on the new Yankee workshop.
The new Yankee workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abram.
The 1994 Chardonnay has a very crisp nose. You know, out here in wine country, if you're not making the wine or tasting the wine, you're talking about the wine. And you've caught me here making some wine notes. But what better place to do it than out on this patio on top of this antique reproduction desk? Now what I like about this desk is the fact that it's made out of nice old pine. The top is just the right size. It has some nicely turned legs and this pencil drawer, which I guess you hardly need anymore. Now I think this would be a very useful project and we should build one at the new Yankee workshop. Now, let's see, next, the 92 Pinot Noir. Let's see. Well, in case we ever do go back to pencil and paper, I decided that the pine might be too soft for a desk. And since I had some access to some antique chestnut, that's what I built ours with. Now, there were some defects that I had to repair, and I used little Dutchmen, and I'll show you how to make those a little bit later. There was a small knot there. There was a knot that went all the way through right here, and there was a split in the board right along this joint. Now I still have to contend with these wormholes because a pencil could still fall into those, and I'll deal with that a little bit later. Now if you'd like to build this chestnut desk, a measure drawing is available with the materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. Now I want to get started today by milling up some boards to glue up a blank for the top. For the last few minutes, I've been taking the boards and running them through the joiner. That squares up the edge and makes it nice and straight so that when I join the boards together, there are no gaps. Now, generally, I like to alternate the growth rings on the boards to minimize cupping of the top. For instance, this board, the rings are down. This one, they're up. This one's up. This one's down. This one's down. Now, we can fix this by swapping a couple of these boards, sliding one over, and they will alternate all the way across the field. But I've found that with the salvage lumber, that's not always possible, so you just have to do the best you can. Now I'm just putting some marks across the intersection of the boards at about 9 inches on center, where I'm going to cut some slots for some beechwood plates that combined with glue will make a really strong joint. Now before I move any of these around, I want to make sure I keep them in sequence. So I'll put some witness marks across the joint. My biscuit location is a single mark, so I want to start with a double mark to not confuse it. Next one will be 3, 4, and so forth. Right now we'll put a little clamp pressure on these, set it aside to dry, and start working on the legs. Each leg starts out as a piece of 3.5-inch square chestnut cut exactly the right length. The first thing I want to do is mark the center on each end. So I use this little device. It's a square that has a lip on it that hooks over the edge of the blank. And we can mark the exact center point. The next thing I want to do is take a scratch awl and just put a mark right at the cross of the lines. And then take my drive center from the lathe and drive that into the wood. Now I just slip the drive center into the lathe. And then now I just slide the cup center so that it's about 1/4 of an inch away from the blank, and then turn it into the wood. Now I'll just turn the lathe on at the lowest speed and visually check the piece to see if it's balanced, and that looks good. Now here's a leg that I turned earlier, and you can see that the upper portion, the top 9 inches, is square. So I want to put a mark at each corner to show me that point. Now I'm ready to start doing some turning. I want to make the blank round from that point down to the bottom at about a 3.5 inch diameter. And to do that, I'm going to use my gouge, which is sort of a scoop-shaped tool. I slide my tool rest up near the piece so that it's about 1/8 of an inch away. Give it a spin to make sure it's not going to hit it, and we're ready to start turning. Okay, now that's nice and round, and so I'm ready to start doing some layout. And I made this layout stick, which shows me all the critical transition points. So I'll put a mark at each location, then with the lathe at slow speed, we'll transfer the mark around the piece. Next, I'm going to turn to my parting tool and my calipers. Here I've mounted a prototype as a reference point, and I'm going to turn these small flat diameters right here, constantly checking with the calipers the prototype to the piece I'm actually turning. Just a little bit more. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to turn to a small gouge and turn these cove areas. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my large gouge and start to form a bead right on this portion. Okay, well that looks pretty good. A little bit of sanding and that'll take care of it. The rails of the table are joined to the leg by means of a mortise and tenon joint. I want to cut the mortises in the leg using my dedicated mortising machine, which I've set up with the 3/8 inch square chisel with the drill bit down through the middle. I've adjusted the fence so that the mortise will be 5/8 of an inch from the edge of the leg. And I also have this bar right here which controls the depth of the mortise, which is 1.5 inches. Now for the tenons. We'll make those at the table saw. I've installed this gauge block to control the length of the tenon, which will be 1.5 inches, and I've adjusted the blade so that it's 3/16 above the table. We'll make the shoulder cuts on the face first. Now with the gauge block still in position, but the saw blade raised up to 5/8 of an inch, I can nibble away the top and the bottom of each tenon. I just made a cheek cut on a scrap piece of material to check the fit for the thickness of the tenon, and that's just right, just snug. Now I make that cut using my tenoning jig, which rides in the miter slot of my saw, and it's a way to hold a piece vertically and securely as I make the cut. Well, we've got ourselves another beautiful day here at the workshop. Now I want to get started this morning by finishing up the rails. I have to cut an opening in one of the long rails for the draw. I also want to mill a decorative bead at the bottom edge of all the rails. And if I tip the table up so you can see underneath, there's a few more things. I need to make a dado at the front and back rails to receive this piece of plywood which supports the draw. I also have to make a groove along all the rails that additionally support the draw and receive the clips that hold down the top. Now here's the front rail with the draw layout. I'm going to cut it with a small trim saw, but first I want to put this piece of plywood, which will act as a straight edge to guide the saw in place. Now I'll use screws to attach it, making sure I put the screws in the waste material. Now with the base plate up against the guide, I'll loosen the depth control knob and carefully plunge the saw blade through the work. Now we'll just flip it around, reset the straight edge, and cut the other side. Now for the decorative bead. I've set up a 1/2 inch beading bit in my router shaper table. Now the important thing here is to make sure that I hold the rail tight to the table surface as I push it through. Now that's one of the cross dados that receive the plywood supports for the draw. I'll finish running this side and then the back rail. Now with the dado head reduced to 3/8 of an inch in width, I can run the grooves for the clips that hold the top. Well, a little bit of glue applied to the tenons and each mortise is all that's necessary to hold this piece together. Now, using just the saw blade, I've nibbled away a rabbet in a piece of pine that becomes the top portion of the draw support system. It fits right in the groove that I milled in the rail earlier, and I'll glue it and nail it in place. These are the side supports, and a hardwood cleat will get screwed along the bottom edge that will actually support the draw. Okay, that takes care of the base. Let's get to work on the top. With the top sanded, I'm using a straight edge clamp and my trim saw to cut the ends straight and square. I'm just easing the corners of the top with my jigsaw. To ease the edges on the top, I'm using a 1/4-inch radius roundover bit. Now, some of this wood is so bad that I can't sand out the defects. I'm going to patch them using what's known as a Dutchman, or a wooden patch. Now, I have a bunch of hardboard templates with different shapes for the Dutchman that sort of remind me of patches I've seen in the past. I've installed some double-stick tape, which will hold it in position over the area while I route out the bad material using my router, which is equipped with this little bushing. It works great. Watch. All right, now to cut the patch, I'm going to remove the brass collar and just use the small portion. I want to make sure that I carefully plunge the collar right in at the corner of my template. Keep the collar tight to the edge as I cut the patch. Now I just remove the template and we'll cut a thin piece of material at the table saw. Now, a good sharp utility knife is all that's needed to remove the patch. A little sanding on the corners will make it fit, and a little glue will hold it in place. Wouldn't the old-timers like this for a method of making Dutchmen? Now, these holes are for screws to secure the top, and I've elongated them to allow the top to move with changes in humidity. Now, a screw through the pine cleat in the center, and at the ends I'm going to use these little wooden clips like I showed you earlier on the prototype. They slip into the groove. I hold them about 1/4 inch away from the leg. Well, now for the draw, and I'm starting with the draw front, rabbiting the ends 5/8 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch. Now I've just milled a 3/8 inch by 3/8 inch rabbet at the top and the bottom of the draw front. We need these rabbets because the draw is an overlay draw, bigger than the opening. Now this dado and one in the other side piece will receive the back of the draw. Now this 1/4 inch groove in the side pieces will receive the draw bottom. After a minor adjustment to the rip fence, here's the groove in the front for the draw bottom. I'm beginning to form a groove in the ends of the draw front to make a lock joint. I'll do it in 2 passes. Now we'll adjust the tenoning fixture to make the groove a little bit wider. Now that was the first pass of 2 necessary to make the groove in the side pieces to complete the lock joint. Okay, let's see how it fits. That's good. Well, a little bit of glue is all we need to secure the lock joint. A little bit of glue and a couple brads is all that's needed to secure the back joint. Now the draw bottom, and this is not secured with glue, just a few brads along the back. Well, there's the draw. Now for the finish. Now, in order to let the natural beauty of this antique chestnut really show through, I decided to use a Danish oil finish. I put on 2 coats. First, a heavy coat. Let it dry for about 30 minutes. Then apply another coat. Let that dry for 15 minutes, and then wipe up any excess that hasn't dried. Now, I've decided to do nothing about the wormholes. But after this oil dries, about 72 hours, I'm going to put on 2 coats of a satin polyurethane just on the tabletop, and that should protect it from any wear and tear that it's going to get. In furniture making, proportions mean everything, and in this case I think we got the proportions just right. I can hardly wait to sit down and start writing at it.